One relationship that is far more powerful than all the others.
The most impressive demonstration in Mr. Gore's movie is the big graph of carbon dioxide levels.
Here's what the temperature has been on our Earth. Now, one thing that kind of jumps out at you is, did they ever fit together?
My goodness. I knew that carbon dioxide is thought to amplify temperature increases, but this shows a clear cause and effect. For 600,000 years, when carbon rose, so did temperature. It suggests that carbon levels control temperature. But the real inconvenient truth is that carbon increases came after temperature rose, usually hundreds of years later. Temperature went up first. I wanted to ask Mr. Gore about that and other things, but he wouldn't agree to talk about this. Why should he when he and others say,
the debate's over. The science is agreed upon.
The debate is over, and the science is in.
It's absurd for people to say that sort of thing. It's really wrong.
These scientists are among those who say the debate is by no means over.
Right there.
John Christie and Roy Spencer won NASA's Medal for Exceptional Achievement for figuring out how to get temperature data from satellites. They agree that the Earth is warmed.
We all agree that it's warmed, I think. The big question is, and the thing that we dispute, is it because of mankind?
Climate changes, they point out. It always has, with or without man. Early last century, even without today's big output of carbon dioxide, the Arctic went through a warm period. The media fretted about that then, too. And Greenland's temperatures rose 50% faster in the 1920s than they're rising now. Some scientists say the warming may be caused by changes in the sun, or ocean currents, or changes in cloud cover, or other things we don't understand. The debate is not over. And anyway, who's to say that yesterday's temperature was the perfect one? If temperatures keep rising now, these scientists say we don't know that will be all bad.
The fact is, when the climate changes, there are gains and there are losses.
But Tim Ball, who studies the history of climate change, points out that all we hear about is the bad news from the IPCC, that massive group of global warming scientists.
1,000 scientists.
2,000 scientists.
2,500 scientists say the globe is getting warmer and we are to blame.
There's the most unmitigated rubbish talked about.
Paul Ryder of the Pasteur Institute and John Christie say they were members of the IPCC. That so-called group of scientists, they say, is not what people think it is.
The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It is governments who nominate people. You'll find in many chapters that there are people who are not scientists at all.
Who are they?
They were essentially activists.
Members of groups like Greenpeace were involved. And when the IPCC report came out, not all its members agreed with what was said.
We were not asked to look at a particular statement and sign our names to it at all.
I got very frustrated and I resigned.
But the IPCC still listed Ryder as part of the so-called consensus.
I contacted the IPCC and said, look, I've resigned. I don't want to have anything more to do with this. And they said, well, you've been involved, so you're still on the list.
Only when he threatened to sue, he says, did they take his name off the report. Today, scientists like these are often smeared as deniers.
We have Holocaust deniers, we have climate change deniers, and to be honest, I don't think there's a great deal of difference.
Deniers are confusing the issue and delaying solutions.
Often they're accused of being purchased by a well-funded denial machine.
These corporate toadies lying to you and telling you that global warming doesn't exist.
Good morning.
The illusion of a debate has been purchased with millions of dollars a year.
Aren't you guys all on the tape?
I wish I was. I wouldn't be driving a 1992 car and living in a leaky apartment.
These scientists all say they don't get any money from business, yet some have been threatened. One email said, you will not live long enough to see global warming.
And even more direct than that.
We stick our necks out. We do get hurt.
Is this what the global warming debate has come to? One side saying, shut up, dissent must not be heard. The truth is that while everyone agrees the Earth is warmed, lots of good scientists don't agree that it's mostly our fault, and don't agree that it's going to be a catastrophe. So when the Nobel Prize winner says,
the debate's over. The debate's over.
I say, give me a break.
If you take CO2 as a percentage of all the gases in the atmosphere, the oxygen, the nitrogen, and argon, and so on, it's 0.054%. It's an incredibly small portion. And then, of course, you've got to take that portion that supposedly humans are adding, which is the focus of all the concern, and it gets even smaller.
Although CO2 is a greenhouse gas, greenhouse gases themselves only form a small part of the atmosphere. What's more, CO2 is a relatively minor greenhouse gas.
The atmosphere is made up of a multitude of gases. A small percentage of them we call greenhouse gases, and of that very small percentage of greenhouse gases, 95% of it is water vapor. It's the most important greenhouse gas.
Water vapor is a greenhouse gas, by far the most important greenhouse gas.
So is there any way of checking whether the recent warming was due to an increase in greenhouse gas? There is only one way to tell, and that is to look up in the sky, or a part of the sky known to scientists as the troposphere.
If it's greenhouse warming, you get more warming in the middle of the troposphere, the first 10, 12 kilometers of the atmosphere, than you do at the surface. There are good theoretical reasons for that, having to do with how the greenhouse works.
The greenhouse effect works like this. The sun sends its heat down to Earth. If it weren't for greenhouse gases, this solar radiation would bounce back into space, leaving the planet cold and uninhabitable. Greenhouse gas traps the escaping heat in the Earth's troposphere, a few miles above the surface. And it's here, according to the climate models, that the rate of warming should be highest, if it's greenhouse gas that's causing it.
All the models, every one of them, calculates that the warming should be faster as you go up from the surface into the atmosphere. And in fact, the maximum warming over the equator should take place at an altitude of about 10 kilometers.
A scientist largely responsible for measuring the temperature in the Earth's atmosphere is Professor John Christie. In 1991, he was awarded NASA's Medal for Exceptional Scientific Achievement, and in 1996 received a special award from the American Meteorological Society for fundamentally advancing our ability to monitor climate. He was a lead author on the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. There are two ways to take the temperature in the Earth's atmosphere: satellites and weather balloons.
What we found consistently is that in a great part of the planet, that the bulk of the atmosphere is not warming as much as we see at the surface in this region. And that's a real head-scratcher for us, because the theory is pretty straightforward. And the theory says that if the surface warms, the upper atmosphere should warm rapidly. The rise in temperature of that part of the atmosphere is not very dramatic at all, and really does not match the theory that climate models are expressing at this point.
One of the problems that is plaguing the models is that they predict that as you go up through the atmosphere, except in the polar regions, that the rate of warming increases. And it's quite clear from two data sets, not just satellite data, which everybody talks about, but from weather balloon data, that you don't see that effect. In fact, it looks like the surface temperatures are warming slightly more than the upper air temperatures. Oh, that's a big difference.
That data gives you a handle on the fact that what you're seeing is warming that probably is not due to greenhouse gases.
That is, the observations do not show an increase with altitude. In fact, most observations show a slight decrease in the rate of warming with altitude. So in a sense, you can say that the hypothesis of man-made global warming is falsified by the evidence.
So the recent warming of the Earth happened in the wrong place and at the wrong time. Most of the warming took place in the early part of the 20th century and occurred mostly at the Earth's surface, the very opposite of what should have happened according to the theory of man-made global warming.